Greetings, friends. I'm going to discuss the concept of formality, ritual, and hierarchy because I think these three things go together. They are inescapable. They naturally arise if you try to destroy them. They are built into the fabric of reality by God. So some definitions. Well, the word formality as a noun is connected to formal, with the adjective, which is connected to the word form. Of course, life is full of patterns that have shape. They have something you recognize that is constant. I'm going to try to illustrate that what we now understand as secular and non-secular has become a false distinction. It may have originally been meaningful in that there was the clergy and the monastic orders, and that was the non-secular and the secular were outside that. But those two worlds were never completely separate. Those two worlds were never having a clear boundary between them. So formal is being in accordance with the usual requirements, customs, conventional, to pay one's formal respects, marked by form or ceremony, a formal occasion, or meaning designed for wear or use at occasions or events marked by elaborate ceremony or prescribed social observance, such as the formal attire, including tuxedos and full-length gowns. The word ritual, a series of actions that are always performed in the same way, especially as part of a religious ceremony. A ritual also meaning something that is done regularly and always in the same way. So keep that in mind. It's not just religious setting. An example of someone using the word ritual would be Sunday lunch with the in-laws has become something of a ritual. Ritual meaning an established or prescribed procedure for a religious or an other rite, like a rite of passage. Hierarchy, finally. The word hierarchy comes from the word in Greek, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but hierarchos, which was formed by combining the words hieros, meaning supernatural or holy, and archos, meaning ruler. The word hierarchy, any system of persons or things ranked one above another. Like the social hierarchy, the political hierarchy. You can be quite high up in the management hierarchy of a corporation, for example. The earliest meaning of hierarchy in English had to do with the ranks of the different types of angels in the celestial order. The principalities of Satan also have their own hierarchy. The second definition of hierarchy is government by ecclesiastical rulers, that is spiritual. So that's the first section of this video. Now I can talk about the examples that I've brought up. But first, high formality versus low formality. I mean, I guess this is where it gets kind of fuzzy and difficult, because we can say that some cultures and some aspects of a certain culture are more formal and others are less formal. That seems obvious. Now, it's fuzzy because how do you escape formality? You can't ever escape formality because, like I said, life has shapes and our behaviors have forms, and there are forms of physical shape. There are patterns of time, the days of the week, weekends, and we're living in an age when they're trying to just bring all these barriers down and mush everything together. But still, there are these forms, these shapes that you can't escape. I mean, the communists they destroyed a lot of the old order, but then they just lead to another power structure. That's a hierarchy coming up. But you see, you can't escape. That's why I'm talking about these things together. There's a formal aspect that implies some ritual, whether more informal like lunch with your in-laws, or less formal like lunch with your in-laws, or more formal like going to a wedding, going to a funeral. And that gets into some of the examples that I brought up. But just the idea of clothing itself. I thought for this video maybe I shouldn't wear a hoodie. Maybe I should wear a button-up shirt. I don't have too much formal clothing. Now I remember when I was 17, I was at a barbecue of a young lady that I knew, and she invited me over, and she was partly of an Italian background. Through her father was Italian, and so all the Italian part of her maybe the other part of her family was there too, but all the Italian part of her family was there, and in the backyard they were having a great time, and they were all dressed formally, and I felt so out of place because I was just wearing just a short T-shirt, like green, like neon green. It looked awful, and I felt so embarrassed. And she noticed that, and she gave me like a button-up shirt, and and then I could blend in, and that illustrates some cultures. They like the formality a bit more than others. In the Anglo culture, maybe we've lost that aspect to an extent. We still have it though. We just have it in different degrees. So clothing is a general example of how formal you are. I mean, you wear different clothing at different times in different contexts. Maybe you don't wear, like, I don't need to wear this formal shirt, or just not even a formal shirt, but I don't need to wear this when I'm sleeping, for example. Music, concerts, the idea, like music itself would have been, historically speaking, a public affair. It's only a very recent thing in history that music became something you could experience privately. This would have been something involving other people at the time when you actually play the instruments. The idea of holidays, festivals, fasts, we think of the medieval world being a world where humans suffered a lot, and there's some truth in that. The life expectancy was lower. But in terms of work stress and work fatigue, I mean, it could happen maybe at harvest time, but there were so many festival days around the year. There were like 20, 30 festival days at least, if not more, depending on the European country. In the Middle Ages, there were so many feast days, and feasts, or maybe more somber occasions too. Maybe you had to fast at times, but that's healthy. That's good. That's a more balanced life. That's the importance of time, the importance of the year, certain behaviors, and it's always how you relate to the group. It's the community that's being emphasized, and your place in the group, your place in the community. Leadership itself shows hierarchy. Not all humans are the same. There's differences even within one culture, between different men. There's differences between men and women. There's differences between races. I'm not saying that one is quote unquote, better than another. I don't believe that, but certainly there are differences. There's certain things that one group of people might excel in, and then they might not excel in another category. But just the concept of leadership itself, even within one race, even within like all the, I don't know, your friends you grew up with in high school. Maybe one person is going to be a natural leader in a certain. It has to do with character. If you put men in a prison, there's going to be a natural hierarchy that arises, and some of that's going to have to do with the natural character of the men. Some of that's going to have to do with their race. Some of that's going to have to do with their age, how old you are, and what's your experience. This all has to do with how we relate in the world. So this is ritual. I pointed out what the definitions of ritual is. So I don't know. I don't understand how people say we can escape ritual. We got it. Ritual is somehow like a satanic thing that only happens in churches. It's like, no, you're always going to have ritual, and there's going to be bad rituals. And whether or not you believe in God and the devil, there could be still like bad barbarian rituals, but they're going to have their own hierarchy too. And you're not going to escape that system. You can just change what you're using, how you're directing that system. For what end? Well, I would say for good or for evil. The idea of the aristocracy, which was eliminated over the last 200 years, or roughly speaking, and there's inevitably we talk about the elites. There's still an elite class, but we've eliminated the idea of an aristocracy or nobility, which was not a bad thing. There were lots of good things. Now, it can do bad things. It can oppress us, I suppose, but you don't do away with these natural positions in society. They have their benefit. And noble was a good thing, like the noble men, not necessarily, I mean, you can say, well, the warlords, the ones who were good at killing, and it's true, the nobility is connected with the military. But are you going to say we never need a military? It's built into the fabric of reality, at least, maybe not built in, maybe not, I'm not going to say like we always have to have war, but it's part of the human condition. No one really wants to be equal anyways. I mean, they talk about us wanting to be equal these days. Oh, push for equality, feminism and, racial justice, social justice, all this stuff that's been going on. When they think about it, I don't think they could even grasp what true equality would really be. They probably just want some satisfaction of getting theirs from someone they don't like, some other group they don't like. We'll see this from any feminist or from, like, look at these Black Lives Matter leadership. I hear about how they're buying, using all their millions of dollars to buy these nice houses in white neighborhoods. They're not really concerned with the whole idea of equality. They recognize there's differences in the groups, and so sometimes they prefer to they don't actually take their own ideas seriously, is what I'm saying. During the last year, there'd be the pot and pan clanking, like show our support for all the health workers, and these brainwashed people. It's like a foreign culture to me, but I can recognize it as a foreign culture. I don't agree with it. I think it's dumb, but it's like that. There's their ritual. It's like the Muslim call to prayer. They're now announcing their thing in your neighborhood. They're letting you know that they're there, and they're there to flourish and prosper by their God. And so the pots and pan clanging is the same thing of a ritual behavior. Funerals, weddings, parades. We might not have so many parades and funerals and weddings anymore because they're all prohibited, but this causes a lot of pain. I mean, these things can't last. Maybe they will succeed in making a more dystopian society, but you can't suppress these things forever unless you succeed in channeling it into some other growth. You may transform culture, but there will be some compensation. And by the way, Zoom meetings and doing things online, they're not going to suffice for the human spirit for very long. As far as I can see, like having school online, that's basically fake. Having an online church service, that just seems absurd to me. That seems ridiculous. Now, I'm not saying you can perhaps get some benefit from communicating with people online, and some people learn English online. I'm sure, but don't say that that's just the same thing, because basic to our spirit and our soul has to do with relating to other people in a community physically, making George Floyd a saint. Even like, I don't mean literally he's a saint, but he kind of is a saint. This is the other thing, like, oh, you can escape from saints. What is saints? Saints points to a hierarchy. The saints are somewhat elevated above the average person for doing or something notable in their lifetimes. Not that they're perfect people, but the same with George Floyd. And they even made icons of him and carried him in processions on some parades. I mean, I'm not saying it was a widespread thing, but it did happen. I've seen the pictures. Just making a mural. You see street murals where they try to glorify people who've died, whether rightly or wrongly. It's the same idea. So we're getting into icon territory here, but you can't escape it. The Protestants tried to do away with this. You can't ultimately escape it, because like, you can try to get rid of pictures and stuff, but reality is more nuanced than just a simple painting or picture. There's other ways that these things are going to express themselves. You're going to be drawn into some kind of ritual, some kind of obvious hierarchy, and varying levels of formality in every part of your life. Different ascending and descending levels from the less mundane to the more special, the more rare, the more occasional. And the edges of a society are loose, sometimes physically loose. This is where you get less formality, but there's always going to be some order asserting itself. I think this is a pretty key idea, the idea of order in the world, formality, ritual, hierarchy, and being right-wing and being a conservative. That's pretty foundational for me. It's pretty important, but maybe that's not a comprehensive answer, but these things would be pretty key. Hasta luego, amigos.